education system so they're responsive to what students want, to what families want, to what employers are seeking, and saying that we're not putting this work on any one body. We're not putting this on K-12. We're not putting it on post-secondary, and we're not putting it on industry. We're saying that we all have buy-in in developing these workforce proposals.
Thanks, Dylan. This proclamation is really important. In fact, in February, the nation's CTE month across the country, NCSL featured Governor Gianforte's proclamation as the way forward. Really a departure from past practice and focusing on personalized learning. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but what is personalized learning? It's truly meeting every student where they are and meeting our constitutional requirement to get those students where they deserve to go and focusing on that pathway for every Montana student. So starting with Title 10 of the Montana Constitution, what is our duty to prepare students? It's not to prepare them for higher ed, it's to develop the full educational potential of each person. For many people that includes higher ed, but for many people that's very specific job skills, whether that is through an apprenticeship or other stackable micro-credential, truly meeting every student where they are and developing their potential throughout their lifetime. It's not just a matter of educating kids until they're 21 or 22. It's really meeting them and developing their full potential through all the services we offer, many of which are overseen by the SWIB. The next piece that's highlighted there is the role of the legislature in our education system to create educational programs as it deems desirable. That's our flexibility. That's one of the powers of the SWIB, is really to interface with the legislature to continue to create new opportunities, whether it's through the Montana Digital Academy, whether it's through some of the gear funding that you'll hear more about Dylan and Brock rolling out at OCHI soon. These desirable programs that can meet students where they are is the direction that we're going. So why are we moving? Are we preparing all of our students for the 21st century? Just think about the old work environment, the bells and cells model of an IBM versus today's Google campuses, right? For our high-tech students. The old work environment was very structured, very classroom-like. Report to your cell or your cubicle when the bell rings and you stay there until it rings again. Versus a Google type environment today where it's outcome and proficiency focused. Time and space are variable, but folks have the freedom and the flexibility to choose how and where to get their work done as long as they're meeting those proficiency targets. Again, we could say the same thing for changing education in our technical field. Automotive technicians of yesterday had very little computerization. They could do great work with a toolbox and some basic mechanical reasoning skills. I'm a former John Deere dealer. We've got Adam in the room. The level of complication of these automated machines that aren't the machines of tomorrow. We have automated machines that are self-operating on the ground in Montana today. Students are not being prepared for that in the old model, and we've got a really big opportunity in front of us to focus on using that primary tool of a laptop and computerization skills, and we can get there. We can get there through our existing channels with some investment and some targeted reform. So why do we have the education system we have? Or why do we have the workforce development system that we have right now in this country? It was created at the turn of the century, the 20th century. It was to prepare workers for the burgeoning assembly line factory model. It was to assimilate immigrants into our culture, for widespread literacy and numeracy. So we had a basic language in the workplace, created critical thinking for only a select percentage. Most people just needed to report to their cubicle or their cell or their spot on the assembly line to do exactly what they were told. Critical thinking was not needed for everyone. And we really, to develop that system, leveraged lessons learned across Europe in the 19th century. So how has this system performed? Really well, actually, for a very long time. For almost a century, the US led the world in education attainment and quality. We drove the biggest economy in the history of the world to new heights. We fostered an explosion of the middle class. It was the backbone of a stable democracy here and around the world. And it was the production engine that helped win 2 world wars and really set the stage for the economy of the entire global interface. What does attainment look like over the last 70 years? From 1940 to 2016, if we measure our 25 to 29-year-olds, high school completion is actually pretty good. We've reached a peak where we're over 90% nationwide year after year. Our bachelor's degrees have reached about 35%, and less than high school is down to less than 10% across our industry. NCSL published a publication in 2017 that was deeply studied across all 50 states called No Time to Lose. They had worked on it for about 10 years leading up to 2016 and really set the stage for us. And what did they say in their findings? We cannot ignore the reality that most state education systems are falling dangerously behind the world, leaving the United States overwhelmingly underprepared to succeed in the 21st century. This was their findings for research done up until 2015, published in 2016. Here we are in 2022, and we haven't quite maneuvered past that yet. What did No Time for Lose find based on the best performers in the US system? A strong early education system, a reimagined and professional teacher workforce, robust career and technical education programs, and a comprehensive aligned system of education is what the high performers across the country and around the world are focused on. So how are we doing academically as a nation? PISA is basically the world's report card. It's the equivalency of NAEP across the world. Look at our numbers in the United States from 2000 until 2015. Reading, math, science. Our leadership on the world stage is going in the wrong direction. These results are released from October of 2019, also found that the US hasn't progressed over the past decade. And for low performing students, that subset of students that struggle, we actually haven't moved them up the benchmark at all in 30 years. So digging into the United States, NAEP, the nation's report card, between 2007 and 2017, Montana was one of only 3 states with our neighbors, North and South Dakota, who actually had a score decrease over that 10-year period. The most improved states up there in the corner, California, Hawaii, Arizona, Indiana, and Georgia. But Montana on a scale actually had the largest relative decline of performance in the nation between 2007 and 2017. So just how far behind is the average United States student in math? A lot of world leaders are ahead of our students, but what you don't see here are some third world countries. Vietnam ranks higher than the United States on math performance. And it's not just a money issue, right? We hear all the time, if we could just fund it better, if we could put more dollars in the classroom, how could we fix it? If you actually look at the per pupil spending for the compared to 4th grade math scores from 1978 to 2012, per pupil expenditures are significantly up, but math scores haven't really progressed. So let's look at some Montana data from Superintendent Arnson's team at the OPI. Comparing just the K-12 population in Montana, we know that while there's always a need for more money, we could always put it to use. Montana schools spending has actually outpaced both inflation and population growth over the last 20 years. So potential solutions. How has the US responded since the reform agenda of the 1970s? We put more money into our classrooms. We more than doubled our per pupil expenditures nationwide in 20 years. We dramatically lowered class sizes. We created school competition in charters and vouchers. We created technology solutions, and we created tough test-based teacher accountability systems that put the teacher first, not students. Our competitors on the world stage and right here in the United States had a different analysis. Rather than modeling their system off of a factory-based model, they modeled it after the professional working environment. They began with the end in mind. They analyzed their system and the global content, and they designed their entire education system as an engineer to get the results they wanted, always beginning with the end in mind. They did not double down on the old model. Inexpensive teachers with low entry standards, the model that's designed to produce a majority of graduates with little more than an 8th grade level of literacy out of the high school channel. They knew the jobs available to them would rapidly decline, and they had to think forward. And they needed to provide a world-class education to every single student, equitably and efficiently meeting every student where they were. And all of that required a whole new model than what they'd used before. If we look at the results of that, just look at the world report card. In reading, 8 systems outscored the US, 11 systems were tied with us, and 57 systems were worse than these. We could do the same for math and for science. There are systems outperforming ours, and we have lessons we can learn from those leaders. So a couple of definitions. What is personalized learning? Personalized learning, in the definitions adopted by Governor Gianforte and all of our agencies doing this work, is an educational approach that aims to customize learning for each student's strengths, needs, skills, and interests. Each student gets a personalized learning plan that's based on what they know, how they learn best. Personalized learning does not replace an IEP or a 504 or intervention programs for students that need that extra level of intervention. This is for every other student to make sure they're getting that personalized attention too. What is proficiency learning? It's a competency-based education approach focused on a student's demonstration of desired learning outcomes. Students can gain the skills and abilities and knowledge required in an area of study, along with those necessary to be successful in college, career, and civic life, inside or outside of the traditional classroom. Proficiency learning identifies and addresses gaps in order to make sure personalized opportunities for every student exist. This is really in contrast to traditional systems where we advance students based on seat time. We judge students based on how many minutes they sit in each class and we decide whether they pass or fail. This is really about evaluating what are the skills they should be learning in those classes and are there other ways they can gain proficiency in those skills. And what are the core elements of personalized and proficiency learning? It's truly approaching each student individually with a deep understanding of that student and development of their learning. The student is involved in choosing how are they going to demonstrate proficiency. The family is involved, there's engagement. And once proficiency is demonstrated, the student moves on, resulting in personalized student-centered approaches, accelerating their progress and preparing each student to fulfill the constitutional mandate of their own educational potential. If we look at a snapshot across the country of where other states are on moving towards this proficiency, competency, personalized learning path, in 2012, Montana wasn't even on the map. We weren't even moving towards this at all. In 2019, just 7 years later, we're moving forward. We've moved the needle some. We're considered an emerging state. We've got some policy in place. We've got the flexibility in place. All of our partners, whether it's the governor's team, the OPI, OG, we're just starting to figure out what this means, but we've got the pieces in place to do it. So that blue line is basically where Montana is today. We're still considered getting started. We're just about to move forward. And the goal would be to rapidly improve Montana's system so that we have a comprehensive statewide approach in the coming years. So what have we done? How did we get here? And what is the bedrock that we stand on? There's a lot of flexibility legislation that's been passed in the Montana legislature already. And that's the rock we stand on. And that's what Dylan was talking about, that we have so many pieces in play. But we need help. We need groups like the SWIB. We need all of you as community leaders and organization leaders to help move your community forward. All of this is determined by the local school board trustees. And 90% of our job is outreach. They don't know what they can do. And then once they know they can do it, they don't know how. That's where our partners like the OPI, OG, and the governor's team come in to help with the how. But first we need your help in showing the what, showing them that this is possible. So first and foremost, the local school boards, the local elected boards of trustees, Quentin, this is you for, would you say 3 more weeks? 3 more weeks. They can waive any graduation requirement based on individual student needs. That's a power that most school board officials don't know they have. With the permission of local board trustees, a student can be given credit for a course satisfactorily completed in a period of time shorter or longer than normally required. We don't have to be bound by seat time. It doesn't matter how much time is in the classroom. If the student needs more time to develop the skill, or if they can develop it quickly to demonstrate proficiency and move on, that's all they need. And the local board can declare that student proficient. I know the OPI is working on some resources to help us with an assessment tool to measure proficiency. All those pieces are coming together, but that power lies with the local board trustees. They can do this now. There's also flexibility in licensure. Again, the OPI right now is working to change some of our licensure standards to make this easier to work with. Those flexibilities continue to be explored, but we're getting there. Montana's legislative action over the last number of years has really moved the needle, starting with proficiency and competency-based learning. Then Senator Jones, back in 2013, passed Senate Bill 175 that allowed us to do personalized proficiency learning for individual students starting in 2013. He passed another bill in 2017 that allowed proficiency and competency to be adopted for the entire school system. So individuals in 13, systems in 17. We've got a lot of pilot programs underway. Transformational learning was the first of its kind in Montana, passed by Representative McCamey and operated right now out of the OPI by a wonderful employee named Crystal Smith. Transformational learning, sometimes we need to explain that transformational learning as a name was what was preferred by some of our partners, like the school administrators, but truly what transformational learning meant was personalized proficiency-based learning. That was the focus of that legislation. It declared that any public or private regulation that discriminates against a district or a student choosing transformational learning is acting against the will of the legislature. So we're finally at that point where we've got some legislative teeth behind our work, that if an individual school or an individual system tells a student you can't have a personalized pathway, the students finally have some recourse because the legislature has declared this is the intent. This is what is available to every student. The sister component to that bill is advanced opportunities, a program also housed at the OPI, passed by Representative Jones in 2019. What this is designed to do is to remove the barriers of cost. Any course, any exam, experiential, online, work-based learning, costs that would normally be borne by the student or the family, there's now a funding stream to take that burden off the student. So if they want to get a CNA license, or the sky's the limit, truly, there is a funding stream to help those students pay those costs to get their certificate in high school. Coming down to 2021, House Bill 246 was really a game changer in the last legislative session. It was run by Representative Marta Bertolio out of the Clancy, Montana City area, and it was a comprehensive codification of personalized learning and to really enhance and clarify the authority of local school boards and what can they do to move this work forward. It included a legislative acknowledgement that the duties of school boards are performed as part of their constitutional requirement. It expanded the definition of instruction, and this is really important. We come up against this every day at the Department of Labor, truly educating employers, schools, and employees of this new definition. It was written as kind of a kitchen sink definition. Any directive, distributive, collaborative, work-based, or other experiential learning that is now supervised, guided, facilitated, and on. Any opportunity you can think of that provides skills to students can be evaluated for proficiency. And if that student can demonstrate they've learned the material, they do not have to learn it again in the classroom. They can move on to higher skills and certifications as they continue their path. It further emphasizes and supports work-based learning opportunities through codification of certification flexibilities and course credit allowances, and the amendment of the definition of pupil instruction, really focusing on meeting those students and getting them what they need before they graduate. And it codifies school trustee authority to waive any course or declare any course equivalent to an industry classroom experience. So if a student, for example, leaves one of the Billings high schools throughout the course of a semester and goes to RDO equipment under the banner of Build Montana and develops comprehensive technical writing skills or diesel mechanic skills or machine operator skills, together between David, Adam, and Bo, they can evaluate the proficiency level of that student in those skills. And that school board can declare it equivalent to regular courses they would have taken in the classroom, whether it was a technical writing English class, whether it was a shop class. If they can demonstrate proficiency on the skill, they do not have to learn it again in the classroom. And it's a partnership between the family and the parent, the employer, and the school to make sure that student is being served. The goal is not to remove a requirement from a student, but to truly evaluate. If they have an opportunity to learn, that learning can be delivered in more than just the classroom, and they work together to declare that proficiency. It clarifies that a college professor from any college can teach a course to K-12 students in Montana for credit. It codifies that licensure for successful educators from other states and provides interpretive guidelines meant to ensure regulatory approach that prioritize granting as opposed to denying licenses. I'll give a shout out to my former boss, the superintendent, who has moved mountains in trying to create opportunities to license out-of-state teachers. It's been a real challenge. It's been a heavy lift. So some of that work has been codified now, making it easier in House Bill 246. And it expands the access of students to offsite instruction. That's what this is really about, right? For advanced placement, dual credit, and career certification courses. And the sweet spot for this is that if a local school district will not provide a personalized work-based learning option for a student, that student can now, under House Bill 46, take a quarter or even a half of their A and B funding monies, their average number belonging, the funds their school district gets paid for their presence. They can backpack that money with them to the nearest appropriate district that will provide personalized learning opportunities. We're still working that out with all of our partners of how that's going to work, but students and families finally have choice. If they are landlocked into a district that doesn't have these opportunities, they can take some of their money to a district that will provide them and they still retain all of their rights and privileges at their home school. They can still play athletics. They can still go to the prom. They can still go to all of their other courses, but they have the right to go get these certifications in high school that are available, just not at their school. So seat time and teaching methods. Flexibility is key, really focusing again on our local trustees to evaluate their students and their community's needs. There is flexibility in seat time now. It aligns well with proficiency-based A and B, transformational learning, and advanced opportunity, all as adopted by the legislature. It says right in statute now that examples of acceptable coursework include those delivered through correspondence, extension, distance learning, adult education, summer school, work study, and specially designed courses and challenges to meet current courses. Acceptable programs must be consistent with the local Board of Trustees policy, but all of this can be evaluated at the local level to meet each student where they are. This has really been limited in utilization to the date. A lot of school trustees are either unaware that this is possible, and some administrators have some hesitancy to change. That's understandable. We have to walk this road together. Some of the work that's been done starting as far back as 2019 is really working to start shared policy goals. Rather than going into the legislature and kind of fighting this out in the hallways, our partners at the Higher Ed Commissioner's Office, Clay Christian, and the members of the Subcommittee on Education started the first day of the session with a shared policy goal of here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a college and career readiness portal. We're going to work with K-12 partners and MUS campuses to more effectively promote CTE. We're going to continuously review the effectiveness of CTE. We're going to explore avenues for developing a system level approach to the recruitment of students into CTE. And we're going to meet with the Education Interim Committee or other legislative bodies to continue to exchange information and feedback to continue to refine these programs. Our policy leaders are doing this, beginning with the end in mind, starting at the front, really agreeing to how do we put these students first. We can continue the same work through the 2021 legislature, where they placed an extra focus on our American Indian students, tribal college partnerships, American Indian linguistic programs, and then a public-private joint venture for CTE and partnering with the Digital Academy, really moving these opportunities forward for students, no matter where in Montana they attend. Currently underway, the legislature in 2021 authorized $1 million for MSU to pilot an effort to increase the focus of teacher education on proficiency outcomes. I'm sure Brock can tell us about that later, but they're well underway. OPI is doing a really heavy lift for us. They're working to pilot a residency-based student-teacher model beginning next fall. The student teacher remains in the community for a year with providing housing and a stipend, focusing on a 2-year teaching commitment to Montana and really focusing on student proficiency education. The governor's office and the Montana Department of Labor are working via the concept of Build Montana to engage businesses, schools, and partnerships across Montana to really drive work-based learning focused on industry-driven stackable CTE credentials. Again, beginning with the end in mind, focusing on getting kids the certifications they deserve in the K-12 channel. And our partners at the Montana School Boards Association and other members of MONPEC are focusing on leading schools through the steps to innovate and utilize these flexibilities one school and one step at a time. OCHI and the university system, again, are pursuing a grant from the governor to create a single dual credit and CTE interface statewide. How great would that be if a student in Winifred or Glasgow could sign into one portal, no matter where they're accessing college courses in dual credit? Really simplifying that planning for parents, counselors, and teachers. And the Montana Digital Academy conversations are underway about the expansion of options, an Amazon-like interface, if you will, to the professional, relevant, industry-driven content from anywhere, not just what's been created in Montana, really unlocking the world for our students. So what is Build Montana? You've heard us talk about it a little bit. There's a couple different versions of Build Montana. There's the pilot project, the industry-driven pipeline that our friends at the Contractors Association lead. But where did it come from? It truly came from a group much like this. Over 400 Montanans during the last governor's election cycle, not connected to either governor, came together to write white papers. Thank you, David and Adam, for really helping us on this education piece. Focus on what did industry want? We know that legislation has opened that CTE interface, right? And so they were operating under the concept of this program called Workforce Montana. We needed to connect the workforce to the locally controlled schools. And what was that going to look like? We were going to stand on the proficiency-based learning releases for students, for systems. We were going to really work with advanced opportunities and transformational learning. Of course, this was all before House Bill 246 tied it all together. And I should give credit where credit is due. This particular slide that we're running through right now was created by now Deputy Superintendent Cheryl Allen, who's now at the OPI, as well as Representative Jones for some legislative presentations, but they were gracious enough to share it with us because it's a good illustration. So what did the workforce look like? It could have been anything, right? Build Montana was construction. They got out of the gate first. Grow Montana was agriculture. Heal Montana was medicine. Any industry you could think of had a place in Workforce Montana, and it was truly industry driven. No more top-down approaches, no more think tanks of, non-industry affiliated folks saying, we've got it, here's what you need. Truly letting industry lead their curriculum and their certification needs. And then connecting with schools. And what was the piece that the school could do? We unlocked insurance challenges. We solved basic IT challenges. We created a funding opportunity for trades academies through transformational learning. How did we tie that together? The interface was groups like the OPI, OCHI, the Department of Labor, the governor, really tying those together. Our governor believes in simplicity. And so thankfully, he decided that trying to remember 32 different industry names was not a good idea. So right now, all of this concept in state government is considered Build Montana or Skill Up Montana, but that's the origin story and what we're working on. The last piece of this through this governor is Accelerate Montana. So Accelerate Montana already existed. It was a private-public partnership based at the University of Montana. So for all you Grizz fans in the room, pay homage to your alma mater. Created through the Blackstone Launchpad. They did some really innovative short-term certificate work with groups like ATG Cognizant for rapid retraining and workforce pipeline building. Through the opportunity that ARPA and COVID relief dollars provided, Montana was given just over $6 million to do rapid retraining. And Governor Gianforte and Commissioner Esau saw that it didn't make sense to create another pipeline to do the same work. Accelerate Montana was already doing this work. And so they reallocated the $6 million of the state's funding to shore up Accelerate Montana to truly help on building this talent pipeline out through existing pipelines. Construction, healthcare, manufacturing, and tech are a big part of the focus, along with cybersecurity under the umbrella of tech. Their goal is 5,000 new employees for jobs in in-demand sectors across the state in this first iteration. They're working to create regional recruitment coordinators, working through the Department of Labor's job service centers. It's regional delivery by partnering with the Montana University system institutions that already have programs, as well as private colleges, tribal colleges, and our high schools to deliver the coursework to students. They're collaborating with private business and state and local chambers to raise awareness and place trainees in jobs. The goal is 5,000 students by the end of next year, and they're moving forward. So questions that come up often, we'll start with these, and then we're open to any questions you may have. Are students required to be paid a wage during work-based learning or these opportunities? No, students are not required to be paid a wage, and here's why. Local employers, local schools, and the families get to evaluate each opportunity for compliance with education requirements and decide what's best. Why is that? Because if you pay a student a wage, the employer has to provide workers' compensation insurance. If you don't provide a wage, the school insurance attaches, both in the transportation time to and from the school and the time spent on the job site. Why is that important? Take some of our small proprietors. Maybe a student in Foresight, for example, would like to start learning about being a wireman for an electrical contractor. That electrical contractor might be a small, privately held, family-owned operation that doesn't have a work comp policy because everybody that works there is an owner, and so they've waived off and they just self-insure their costs. Now, the barrier to entry for that student, if the employer had to provide workers' compensation, is expensive. It's $2,500, $3,500. The employer is not going to invest that cash as well as the education opportunity. So we've created an environment under Representative Fred Anderson's bill last session to truly allow the three partners to come together, the family, the employer, and the school, to evaluate every opportunity and make sure that the student is either paid or not paid, has the insurance protections they need under the law, and they get to decide it on a flexibility basis at every single program. Are all K-12 work-based learning experiences apprenticeships? No, they can be, but a formal internship or registered apprenticeship is not required to qualify under the flexibilities in law. A student can be gaining proficiency and skills without being a part of a registered apprenticeship, but they also can be in a registered youth apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship or formal apprenticeship. Again, that flexibility lies with the family, the school, and the employer. And how are students covered by workers' compensation during work-based learning? We touched on that. but is truly decided by the employer, the local administrator, and the family. So we've got the bedrock, we've got the groundwork, we have all the flexibilities we need. We've got a lot of work to do. So based on your conversation this morning, I know Dylan and I were both pretty encouraged to hear you moving towards, education redesign. What's the flexibility, what we can do? We've laid the groundwork. What are your questions and where do you want to go next? How can we help?
Thanks, Sarah. Dylan. Questions? I mean, go ahead.
I have a question. So, if a student is going to get credit for the work they're doing, how is that overseen by the school?
The local trustees set their own policy for how they're going to evaluate that.
So do they work with, they determine then what teacher oversees it? What kind of workload does that give the teacher?
There's a lot of flexibility. It can be overseen by a teacher. They can set up a structured process. We're really moving down the pathway that we're excited to see the proficiency assessment the superintendent is developing, but it's truly up to local control. There is no one size fits all model. We don't have a pathway to give you. The Montana School Boards Association has developed a number of sample policies and can walk a local school board of trustees through what their options are. But it's not one size fits all. And from the department standpoint or the governor, we don't have a recommendation. We truly think this should be delivered from the local level within the confines of law.
And so, I mean, there can be a teacher of record, and this is pretty common. The thing that's missing right now is something that's not offered is a tool to test proficiency. And I get it, schools need help with that. There is a lot of industry-driven national curriculum out there. There is a lot of free available proficiency assessments out there. And so what we need to do is work as state partners for those experiences that are going to be pretty common and that could directly translate to materials that would be learned in the classroom. How do we get tools to the districts to help them really determine whether proficiency has been achieved or not? And then it kind of takes the pressure off of the teacher of record. It takes the pressure off of the industry. If they know that the work-based learning opportunity is going to translate into something that there is already third-party curriculum or industry-based, industry-recognized curriculum, then there's probably a proficiency assessment that's already attached with that. And then all you need is someone who's providing the training opportunity and a teacher of record in the school to make sure it does align with what the local standards are.
I can speak a little bit because we went through this. So Office of OPI has workplace experience and as a course that you can offer, and it has all these different ones for business depending on the licensure. So we took that to our school board. We made a new course. They voted for it and put that into our course catalog. And so no matter what a student comes and asks for, we kind of have all of the offerings that OPI has under their licensure. And then we work directly. So a student, for example, comes, I want to be an electrician. And I work to find them an employer. We have a teacher who has the right licensure, bring them into the conversation. The business and the teacher kind of develop learning outcomes, and some things they pull from, like, for example, in this case, it's a registered apprenticeship. You have to, in order to be an electrician, you have to go through that. They take proficiencies that you would evaluate an apprentice with, pull that into a document that the teacher, the employer, the student, the parent, everyone agrees upon, and you can offer that school credit. And then on the teacher side, so the nice part, so when they are a teacher of record, they still count for their daily count. So each teacher, I believe it's 150 students. They can't have any more of that on their caseload. That still counts like towards that student or that teacher's caseload, so that it's as if the student is still in their classroom. So they are technically being compensated to be, that's a student that they're responsible for. We as a district have decided to offer curriculum hours towards that. So whatever a teacher puts into developing those with the business, we then pay them a little bit additional. It's like at a $30 an hour rate, but that's kind of, I guess, explains how we as a local school district have employed it. And it's something that I think is scalable, but also has a little bit of customization depending on your size and what licensure you have available to how to do that. Does that make sense? Is that too much?
No, it does make sense, and I guess that brings up my next question, so that's great for Billings. What if I live in Winnet? And I don't really have, what I'm interested, and you brought up the fact that you could, if the school doesn't have the program, and that district decides not to do the program, but I want to do it, where do I backpack to?
Nearest appropriate district.
And how do I do that as a student who's living 20 miles out of Winnet? And it's already a challenge just to get to school and win it. I see this as a great
So we have
model
work to do,
for,
right, Mary? We have all the pieces are in play that allow it. And now we, as a state and a SWIB and state agencies, OPI, OCHI, Department of Labor, Governor's Office, now we have to figure out how to deploy them. We have the flexibility, and now is the next step. Now we figure out how do we use them. Do we have some sort of a transportation share between Winnet and a nearby school? Do we have Townsend and Helena sharing programs? At what piece do the smaller schools get to specialize in, right? Townsend has a great construction program like you shared. Should that be their focus, and should the Helena students focus on something else? The sky's the limit. There's going to be some summits this summer between the governor and the Board of Education, the Board of Regents. The AA superintendents are doing some work. Everybody's trying to figure out the how. What we were trying to share with you today is the why and the what. The case for change is clear. We're not serving our students. I opened with some of you this morning by sharing, we know we graduate about 14,000 students every single year in Montana. And every year over the last 10, we get closer and closer to 50%. Over 6,000 students every year are not served by either entering the university system, joining the military, or getting a good paying job. 6,000 kids every year just deploy without a stackable certificate or a credential, right? And then, like we said, as we're doing the deep research with Brock's team at OCHI on our college-bound students, we know that over 74% of entry-level jobs in Montana right now are not served or are underserved by our university system offerings, right? We've got to reconnect higher ed and the industry to design what we need. Today was all about the why and the what, and I'm really excited, I think Dylan is too, to work with all of you about the how.
And there's always going to be geographic barriers, right? But now more than ever, we have technology to help supplement that. So you'll hear a lot about that from the governor, is we have the ability to take coursework online that can help set the foundation and then find work-based learning opportunities to expand on that in communities. And now we even have VR technology that's being integrated into a lot of the Boys and Girls Clubs across the state, where they can actually use the VR headsets to do, and I've tested them myself, it's pretty amazing, pretend that they are in a healthcare facility, pretend that they are in a mechanic shop. And so as technology progresses, those barriers, regardless of where you are going to get smaller and smaller. And sometimes those small schools are most in a position to figure out what their local niche is that they can get kids into. I mean, do you want to talk about the Miles City?
Sure. One of our examples actually came out of a policy conundrum that Dylan pulled me into that wasn't really in my lane. He just knew that I was from Glasgow, and Commissioner Armstrong had also called me and said, we're in crisis. Our nursing home is failing. We don't have enough cash to keep the doors open through the end of the year. The local county commission is going to give them $500,000 of ARPA money, but that's one time only. The state ARPA money has already expended as much as they're going to into our nursing homes. We are in a cash free fall and we're going to close. What can we do? So in concert with Dylan and our healthcare policy advisor, Charlie Brereton, who's also the chief of staff at DPHHS, we took a look at it. What is driving those cost curves? It's the cost of staff. In small rural communities, it's that every single employee that's worked there has figured out that if I quit my job on Friday and sign up with the travel agency, I can show back up next week for probably twice the money. Who can blame them? That's the environment we're in. The reimbursement model from Medicaid does not take anything into account like COVID costs or added cost of travel staff, and we can't keep our doors open. What can we do through education? We can utilize our high school students that can do so much more than we give them credit for. And the state licensure rules allow a CNA to be 16 in a nursing home versus 18 in another facility. So very quickly, in the middle of the semester, we worked with Dylan, we worked with the local county commission and the home, and we worked with President Slinger at Miles Community College and said, let's pop up a CNA training program through a work-based learning environment. We recruited in 3 small towns in eastern Montana, starting with Glasgow, cohorts of 8 students each to do a remote self-paced CNA training program through the Miles Community College. So that's their stackable credential, right? That gives us our proficiency measure. There's a test at the end. The local facility have trainers and proctors that will help them along the way. We think that once we get this scaled up, we're going to offer it 5 times a year. It's a short course. It can be offered twice per semester, once in the summer. We think if we get the pipeline built of just 8 students per cohort in these small towns, we can staff Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. with high school students, 4 hours a day, twice a week. That bends that cost curve back down for this facility. And what's so neat about this healthcare track for these students is that we're not just recruiting from the drift, the 6,000 students that didn't otherwise have a path, right? For some of them, yes, this is a great opportunity to finally connect value and outcome with education. They engage, they're excited to be a CNA. When they turn 18 and after they graduate, maybe they want to become a med aide. Maybe a couple of years from now, we can reconnect them with the university system and they can go on to get their 2-year nursing degree, or maybe some year their 4-year. But what we also can solve in this is our really high performing students in small towns that self-identify as wanting to be physicians or physical therapists, right? What's the avenue for most Montana kids to be a doctor? The WWAMI program, our partnership through the University of Washington, that the legislature buys seats and buys down the cost for students to attend. What's required on the WWAMI application? When you are 23 years old and applying to WWAMI after you've gotten your undergrad, you have to check a box that says you worked 150 hours in a medical facility in Montana. It's not time bound. You can do this CNA program as a junior and check all those hours before you even graduate high school and then focus on higher ed. Or maybe you work as a CNA or a med aide in high school, bringing down your cost of education. We're serving all of Montana's students truly uniquely. And there's some really cool things we can do because they're small towns, not just because they're disadvantaged. There's some unique flexibilities that small towns can rally and really support their community and advance our students.
So within those examples there, Miles City, are they paying these 16-year-olds?
That particular one, yes, because it didn't cost the facility anymore to add them to the work comp. So those particular students, Mary, help me, are they making $12 an hour?
Yeah, more like 13 or 14, yeah.
Yeah,
Now, they're not exiting the K-12 system at that point.
they
They're
are
just-
not. So we're using the flexibilities of freed seat time, and they're leaving school 2 hours a day or 4 hours twice a week to go work in the facility. They're getting credit for their time spent, and each local board that we're working with is evaluating that education, deciding what is it equivalent to in their existing course catalog.
So I guess science or biology.
One of those schools is looking at, hey, we think in this curriculum from MCC, we think this is the same as the first semester in the anatomy and physiology class that we offer. So if the student can pass the test, boom, you don't have to take that class, you get the grade. One of the schools thinks, hey, this replaces a whole year of health class. Great, check the box. They develop or they demonstrate proficiency, and now that's freed up seat time. They're still progressing towards their accredited requirements to graduate. We're still moving them forward in skills and abilities, but we can free them up during the day.
The schools are still getting their state. based
They
on
are.
their
It doesn't affect A and B money. It doesn't affect the accreditation of the nursing homes. There's so many flexible ways we can do this. That particular one was a pilot created in crisis. So
Yeah, well,
bear
you
with us. We're
mentioned
building
one
on
of
the
my
fly.
questions about, I mean, the age requirements. You know, some of these positions, I mean, well, I think, you know, a lot of the apprenticeship models have an age requirement within that. So how are those adapting to being able to accept students at younger age? And
that's a
how
really
does it
great
not
question.
dilute those programs?
Yeah, this is actually a policy point that Dylan and I have worked really hard on for about the last month. Thanks to Pat Nelson, who just joined our team, who helped us get to the bottom of it quickly. Yes, there are some programs that require higher levels of entry, right? It might be, let's take the iron workers, for example. You might have to be 18, have a high school equivalency, and be ready to work 40 hours a week or more. That's okay. But there is nothing in state code or statute that requires every apprenticeship do that. All it requires is that you enter continuously, no start and stop, be part-time, you could be in school pursuing your completion at the same time. So as long as the employer doesn't require it, we don't have to. And if the employer does require it, that's where we bring in partners like the apprenticeship team at the Montana Department of Labor, or in some cases, Jason and his team at Reach Higher, to create on-ramps, whether it's a youth apprenticeship or a pre-apprenticeship. We can still do that. And we hope to work with employers and apprenticeship sponsors, like for example, the iron workers, so those hours invested on the front end still count for something when they join a regular apprenticeship. We're still working out that nuance, but I think we've got all the right people at the table to create that opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Hophoff and Sarah. I mean, my gosh, it's almost every time I hear you talk, it's so inspiring and thanks. I think you actually hit on a lot of the things that are happening on the university side. And also, I know our partners at OPI, a lot of innovation. And look, the case for change is so clear. I think it resonates perfectly with the commissioner's vision and the board's vision. Whether it's the public-private partnerships. Dave, you were there at Helena College when the Finishing Trades Institute came, and actually the governor was wearing some of that VR equipment and working through a job site. Accelerate Montana is a terrific example. Again, at Helena College, you mentioned automotive tech. They've got a great partnership with auto dealerships in Helena where actually students can be studying and working on some of that new technology. So the case for change, no doubt something that resonates with our vision. I mean, when we talk to our campuses and sometimes with faculty, sometimes with administrators, we've got to get out of an administrative centered program or a faculty centered program and really make sure it's students first. And we talk all the time about, it's not about whether students are college ready, it's about whether our colleges are student ready. And ultimately the terms individualized learning and personal potential, that's college, right? And it is not always 4 years, not always graduate, it's 2 years, it's micro credentials, but it's about focusing on the student's potential and not even necessarily like the job opening. It's really about what the student needs, and that solves the job opening crisis in itself. We know that for students, right, over the long run, there's $1 million wage bonus for a bachelor's degree compared to high school education. We know you're 8 times less likely to lose your job if you have a college degree, associates or bachelor's, during an economic downturn. And I think, no show of hands, but also there's this notion of what someone's potential really is. And yeah, you got to start at that entry level job. But for lots of people, in fact, most people, they probably don't dream about staying in that entry level job forever, right? And ultimately, if you want to sit around this table and be a decision maker, an influencer, again, I bet not everyone here had some college experience, but most of us probably did have some college experience. So it's about that human potential, that individualized potential. The change has got to happen now. We got to shake up this old model. And to me, the question is, what's the theory specific? A lot of this that we heard today and a lot of what we're doing in the university system is kind of decentralizing and deregulating some things. And lots of regulations are kind of burdensome and they're old. They were designed 100+ years ago. But I think it's about finding that sweet spot. Like those countries that leapfrog the United States, China, Vietnam, Singapore, they actually have the most centralized education systems in the world. That's not the United States. That's not going to work for us. But I think we got to figure out, okay, how quickly and how much do we decentralize, and then where do we stop given Montana's needs and given our culture and our economic vision. I think that individualized approach, the Google Workspace, that's all about critical thinking, communication, developing these individual skills. It's not a factory job, no doubt about it. And then we've got to work a lot with our accreditors, get them open to the pace of change. We have to acknowledge, look, we can't tear down everything overnight. I mean, at the mine or at Northwest Energy, you're not going to change all of your systems overnight, but we've got to push so that we don't get complacent, we don't slow down. I think it's really inspiring to have this partnership, and just to see Dylan and Sarah there and to see this group around here, just know the university system is plugged in, ready to go, recognizing a ton of room for improvement, but on board 100% as partners.
I just want to add, I know with Highlands College and Butte, you talk about those stacked potentials or the traditional paths, the in and out of different stuff. Yeah, for us, we have a 6-month program, pre-apprentice line program at Highlands College. They can get other things. They may decide, hey, Denver, we might like this. And so those in and out options have seen great results in the short years.
Dylan put it perfect. It can't be either or. You can't be graduating high school and say, okay, well, am I going to go to college now, or am I going to start my career? Got to be able to do both of those things. And for adult learners, same thing, in and out. Yeah.
Great discussion, great presentation. Dylan, Sarah, thank you. For a short break, and next presentation will begin at 2. There is time though this evening to have more of these conversations with one another at our reception, and so I would definitely encourage you to bring those up too. Yeah.
Multiply.
I just wanted to follow up by saying, yeah, I wish we could talk a little bit longer about that because I've heard, like, just because I'm in it, some of the things that Sarah laid out, I think would work for smaller schools, like just because I'm in, again, I represent a large school district, I understand for me, to have the version that we have. There's some flexibilities to make it happen, but the part I'm worried about is that we see those classrooms with those teachers of record, those are the relationships, that's like the sandbox, like,
Right.
how do I know, you know,
Right.
that's the part I can't crack, where it's like, I don't know, and like, how do I have an automotive class? No, some of the stuff that I want to responsibilities, just because you don't have a teacher, that doesn't mean that A&V funding, some of the efficiency, like where the teacher is, industry is leaving, or leading what the, I guess what the learning outcomes are, and the teachers kind of teaching them how to put it into a proficiency, if that
I'm
makes
so glad
sense.
you're here, Heather. I'm
So I like, I don't, long way of saying, I see a way
figured out. I'm
that
glad
this
you're here.
will work, I just worry about the
Yeah.
futures, because that's where we're like,
I'd love to
that's
talk
a,
to you guys
that's a.
some more. Sally Wicks and then Madison Blown and the HOSA director. His name escapes me. Oh, Katie. Yeah. We're gonna try to get together. I think coffee in the next couple of weeks.
That's what they're asking, they're
What
asking.
I agree to. It'd be great to see.
My parents.
Well, I met with Madeline and I met with you know, this is my parents. They
So what do we?
Yeah.
You were here, you had this round. All of the different. Okay, folks. You know, and you've got all these different components. There's, I didn't know I was Irish or Italian, I guess it's my Irish side, but you have different. silos. So how bring it all in and say, okay, who's doing this? How do we connect those dots?
I'd like to welcome Tari Sproles to the SWIB board for a presentation on challenges of childcare. That's a topical and big issue for us.
It is. Thank you all for having me. Thanks to Wes for inviting me, and thank you for letting me present today, because it's definitely a hot topic and definitely a really challenging issue. So I'm Tori Sproles. I'm the Executive Director of Childcare Connections, which is a local childcare resource and referral agency. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that. But basically what I'm here to do is talk to you about some of the challenges around childcare, as well as how it relates to our workforce. So just to give you a little background, I don't know how familiar you are with childcare resource and referral agencies, but we are contracted with the state of Montana, the Early Childhood Services Bureau, to provide services to families and childcare providers across the regions that we serve. So Montana is actually divided into 7 regions for our childcare resource and referral agencies. I'm the Executive Director of Childcare Connections, which covers Region 4. So we cover the Bozeman area as well as the Helena area. And we are part of a bigger network called Raise Montana. That is a statewide network that looks at childcare resource and referrals, looks at helping families and children, and basically supporting their needs. So in just a very quick snippet of what Childcare Connections does, we provide supports to childcare providers. So anytime I say the word provider in this presentation, it's a childcare provider that I'm referring to. We provide supports to them that include professional development opportunities, on-site supports for working with young children as far as like challenging behaviors, lesson planning, that type of thing, as well as we facilitate our quality rating improvement system for the state of Montana. So at Childcare Connections, we have folks that go into programs and help them really increase their quality. And that's literally just a snippet of what we do in the provider realm. But then for families, we have a program called the Best Beginnings Childcare Scholarship, which is a subsidy that is income-based. And it is a statewide subsidy that's basically a reimbursement program for families that meet a low income qualification to help them pay for childcare. So again, little snippet of what we do. If you actually want to come to my office, I can tell you way more, but that's just for essence of time today. So we know that we have a workforce shortage across the state, across the nation. That's not a secret. One of the things that is most impactful though to that workforce shortage is the availability and the affordability of childcare. So I'm not preaching to the choir here. You all know that. We all know we need childcare. But in order for people to actually enter the workforce and remain in the workforce, they need a sustainable childcare situation. So this is really just my childcare challenges at a glance. This is kind of what I'm going to be focusing on today, is showing you some of the main things that are challenges around childcare. One of them is obviously the shortage of childcare. Then we have the cost of childcare. We also have our childcare workforce itself. And then we have just a basic need for further investment around childcare. So here are just some statistics for you. So as you know, Montana is suffering. There's a childcare shortage. We are covering about 47% of the childcare need statewide. Licensed childcare programs are full with wait lists in most cases, and any opening available is usually for only preschool age children. So we are definitely underserving our youngest citizens, our infants and toddlers, which we know that brain development between 0 and 3 is very, very important. So currently, Montana facilitates what I mentioned as the Best Beginning Scholarship Subsidy, which is an income eligibility program that looks at helping families who have a low income to help them pay for childcare. Now, the sad thing about that is that this program is based upon federal poverty level. And right now, it just increased last summer to 185% of FPL, but we are still underserving all of the people that need help paying for childcare. So right now, currently, we are meeting about 52% of approval rate. We're seeing 52% approval rate for our Best Beginning Scholarship applications. What that means to you is that back in 2019, pre-pandemic, pre-inflation, wage increases, all of the things that have happened in the last 2 years, we were seeing at a statewide rate of 75% of approval. And now it's about 52%. This looks a little bit different across the state, depending on where you are, of course. In Bozeman or the areas that my organization serves, the Region 4, as I mentioned before, we're looking at something even lower. It's around 25 to 37%, depending on the month. So just because of high wages, things like that, they are not eligible to participate, as well as some barriers to the actual program itself, which we'll get into here in a minute. So in addition to that, basically a childcare provider, so we're looking at the childcare workforce too. A childcare provider is only making about $11 an hour. Looking at the most recent information that came out in for 2021 data, we're about $11 to $12 an hour in Montana for childcare providers. So people that are taking care of our youngest citizens, growing their minds, doing all of this work, are making barely the wages to just live here. And then in addition to that, childcare is considered affordable if it costs less than 7% or less of a family's annual income. Yet Montana averages about 16.5. It's almost double what is deemed affordable. So last point I want to make is just the initial investment in childcare. So in all Montana children, if they all were given access to quality education for an additional $197 million, that investment would actually generate $317 million in Montana businesses. So hopefully that is all not news to you, but just some eye-opening facts to get started. So this just really kind of looks at that 7% of the family's income. The majority of families across Montana have 2 children. So we're looking at Gallatin and Lewis and Clark County, just because those are the 2 biggest counties that we serve. Families that have 1 infant and 1 toddler, which basically means children under the age of 3, spend actually 28% of their income. So over 25% of their income on childcare. And that is astonishing, thinking that 7% is actually affordable. So this just kind of gives you some breakdown of some cost price points here. So childcare might be expensive, right, for all of us to access it. However, early childhood professionals who care for the youngest citizens are paid the lowest wages. So as I showed you on that past slide, most childcare providers are making about that $11 to $12 an hour, which is 125% of the FPL for Montana, for the nation. And so again, really, really low. Childcare is so expensive because there's a lot of overhead. The cost to actually provide quality care to a child is a lot. We have a double-edged sword. Parents can't afford to pay more, childcare providers are making no money. So most childcare programs are small businesses. They rely on income from parents to pay for personnel, overhead, classroom materials, all of those sorts of things. And again, we can't charge families more because they're already spending upwards of 16% and more on childcare. So looking at the breakdown, this is kind of a study that was done, and all the links are on this that you can access in your own time. But basically a study that was done looking at just kind of the cost breakdown. 65% of their overhead, of their cost is personnel expense. And so again, they're still not getting paid very well, but the majority of that is going to personnel expenses. And then of course, classroom materials and just overhead expenses in general. Childcare is a high demand workforce. It is definitely something that has low child-adult ratios for health and safety and quality reasons, but that obviously means that it puts more impact on the bottom line. It doesn't pencil out. Inputs and outputs doesn't work. So in addition to that, just like every other workforce, we're struggling. We can't find childcare providers to actually work in childcare programs due to lots of things. Wages and benefits, the stress of the job, the cost of care that I just mentioned before, and our workforce is very undervalued. They are not seen as professionals. They are not seen as people that give back to our communities, to our workforce, to our economy. They're just seen as, I hate to say the B word, but they're seen as babysitters. And so we are trying to move the needle on all of those things at this point. Some possible solutions to that, which we'll talk about a little bit more of our solution-based focus, but some possible solutions to our workforce issue is around some federal funding, financial aid to providers. This might look like not our Band-Aids that are coming out with some of these ARPA funds and COVID dollars that are just going to go away in 2 years. These are going to be looking at things like subsidizing compensation based on living wage calculations per county. This is going to look like continuing to provide startup and expansion and emergency grants for childcare providers so that when they are starting a childcare business, they have access to the resources that they need. And then obviously, in addition to that, we have a huge need for quality out there. This is really important work that we do. And so subsidizing, the cost of care to help providers actually provide the quality care, to have the materials that are well-rounded and support development, and having some incentives to providers that actually serve at-risk populations. I will say some of those financial aid pieces are being piloted through the Stars to Quality program, which is our quality rating and improvement system. So I do believe it would be easy to kind of duplicate that and try to make it bigger for the larger population. In addition to that, respect for profession. This is just the communities, the states, federal levels, nations, just really seeing this as good work and really important work. So childcare availability and affordability directly impacts the workforce, obviously. Childcare is a workforce and an economic issue, and the major challenge for employers is retaining staff and because there's a lack of reliable and affordable childcare. So this is just some eye-opening statistics around that 67% of parents working work schedules are affected by childcare challenges, an average of 7.5 times over a 6-month period. That is a huge impact to employers. 40% of Montana businesses report difficulty in just recruiting and retaining staff because they can't find childcare. Even this campus we're sitting on today, we've had this conversation a lot about the fact that they can't recruit instructors from out of state to come live here for the first reason, housing, of course, but then the second reason is childcare, because our workforce is getting younger and people have children. And then the last piece is something we're going to talk about a little bit more about some of our solution-focused topics around employer-supported childcare. So an on-site childcare program can reduce an employer turnover by 60%. So if businesses chip in and do some of this work with us, they can also create some retention. So now that I'm done with the challenges, let's talk about how we can move this needle and we can do some solution-focused conversations. So statewide right now, obviously, it's been mentioned here already today, just around some of the ARPA funding that's happening. So childcare in Montana received $110 million towards different initiatives through ARPA funds. ARPA funds are obviously time-bound and they will expire at some point. But for now, it's been really helpful that these stabilization grants that have gone out to childcare providers that are currently operating childcare facilities within the state of Montana have been really helpful. They're helping with operating costs, they're helping with compensation, those types of things. Again, ending in 2024. Workforce incentives. There have been some workforce incentives deployed to childcare workers specifically that are currently in lead roles in childcare programs. That includes lead teachers, assistant teachers, directors, anybody that's working directly with the children can have these incentives. And they're just monetary stipends that are going to happen twice. Once this May, so they'll get about $600 in May, and then if they continue working in childcare through December, they get an additional $1,000. So again, little monetary incentives to be in the field. Expansion grants, which we have not seen drop, and hopefully that still comes, is looking at really expanding childcare businesses. So providing some funding to be able to expand current operating programs, whether it's adding more children or adding more space or those types of things. And innovation grants, which you may be aware of, are the community innovation grants that the RFP was just released 2 weeks ago. And that's looking at community innovation and what can we do as a community to move the needle and fix this problem, which I'll talk about here in just a second. And then the healthcare workforce scholarship. So I mentioned the Best Beginning Scholarship eligibility levels of 185% FPL. There is currently an assistance program out there through ARPA dollars to help the healthcare workforce with basically increasing that FPL to 250%. However, even with that being said, we are not meeting the need out there for our healthcare workers, and they are definitely some of the highest paid people, but also some of the lowest paid people in some of those realms. And so we just at Childcare Connections, we have taken in about 47 applications for that healthcare sector, and we've approved 6. So again, still not meeting that eligibility criteria for that. And then the last thing is some barriers for childcare in Montana is licensing. So there's obviously licensing regulations for childcare providers, and there have been some barriers to employers opening up childcare programs, to just space that you have to have for childcare programs. All of those things cause a barrier. So there was a big study that has been done through a consulting company for the state, looking at what are those barriers and how can we change that. So currently in process, and part of the ARPA dollars is being used to kind of look at those regulations and change them and adapt them to make pathways for not only just childcare licensing in general, but also maybe some drop-in cares, after-school programs, those types of things. So there's some conversations happening at that level. So that's good stuff. The other good things that are happening statewide is just the conversation. You all are here. I'm able to give you a 30-minute presentation. This is amazing. I've been in this field for, wow, 20 plus years. I've been at Childcare Connections for 10 years. And in the last 6 months, I've done more of these and had more conversations about this than I have in 10 years, which is very, very exciting. So locally and kind of expanding locally. So we cover that region that I mentioned, the Helena area and the Bozeman area. We have pulled in a bunch of different partners to what we've called the Child Task Force, which I will describe to you here. This came about by just starting to have a conversation about those community innovation grants that are coming out. How can we write for this? What does that mean? What does that look like for our community? Can we do this together? So on and so forth, which you'll be happy to know we are going to write a collaborative community grant for those innovation dollars. But in addition to that, we have stemmed some great work around lots of different things. Childcare workforce, which we are looking at a salary study. What is a livable wage for a childcare worker? How do we professionalize the field? How do we get that out there? And also supports for people entering the workforce. So you all were talking about apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship programs. We're looking to expand those for early childhood so that people come out of high school ready to work in a childcare situation, come out of college like super prepared, not only with the credentials around early childhood, but also the workforce development that they need to be in Montana's childcare system. Our financial group is working on some innovative ways to get dollars back into the childcare field. This can look in a lot of different ways. They are creating a financial model for our employer-supported childcare. They're also just looking at innovative ways to kind of pull in tax credits and resort tax credits and like those types of things, and having those conversations at a bigger level. And then community innovations is really looking at breaking down those barriers, doing shared services for childcare providers, trying to reduce the expense as much as possible. And business supports, we're working with our local chambers to figure out how do we support businesses in actually doing this? How do we support businesses in having family-friendly practices? How do we support businesses in looking at childcare in a different way, looking at family-friendly practices, subsidizing care, providing stipends for their employers, or last but not least, that third tier is really opening up a childcare program or buying slots in a currently existing childcare program. So that child task force is, obviously, you saw some of the players that are at the table. We have some great participation in those conversations, including legislators, county commissioners, city commissioners, and they are trying to move the needle all the way up to the state level as well. So ways to support. So now we get to just how you all can help, how the communities can help, how the state can help. Policy revision is huge. So we have always, in 10 years I've been at Childcare Connections, we have always looked at the Best Beginning Scholarship as an underserved subsidy. We definitely need to expand the income guidelines for that. And review the barriers to our scholarship applications. So really looking at some of the qualifications for like child support and those types of things that are built within that subsidy. Looking at that is huge. And that is something that has started to be a conversation. So that's exciting. Childcare licensing obviously is another barrier, which is in progress, and hopefully we can move the needle on that. Some other innovations, possible innovations is that universal pre-K. So you've heard it the last 2 legislative sessions. We've been talking about it a lot, about creating some mixed delivery methods of universal pre-K to support the public as well as the private sector of childcare, and really get those I would say 0 to 5-year-olds, even though pre-K really does cover that 3 to 5 years, but really getting them some public dollars to get them some good education. And then community engagement. So we have been really trying to just move this community needle as well, and just look at like, how can a community support childcare? They can sponsor an existing childcare. They can help with monetary incentives, providing materials, travel stipends, housing. Just in the region that we serve at Childcare Connections alone, we've got Big Sky and West Yellowstone, and we've got places that have all these commuters that are going to work that have no childcare, have no housing. They don't have housing for the childcare workforce, so on and so forth. And then a recruitment of staff obviously is huge. Gap scholarships for families, just trying to figure out how communities can come together and businesses can come together to actually just provide some more scholarship opportunities so that families can pay for childcare. And then of course, employer supported, which we talked about. So, I mean, that's what I got for you today. I know I talked really fast and that was a lot of information. We've got lots of supplemental materials and lots of things that we're working on. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
As far as the licensing for our facilities, is that at the state level or is that at the federal level?
Both. There are some federal requirements that impact licensing, but a lot of it is governed by state. Yeah.
Good. We just heard a presentation about how Valley County handled the nursing. Would that same model work for high school kids to jump into daycare?
Absolutely.
Then blend into an early child care development.
Yeah, that whole
Teaching.
So are they short
Absolutely.
people or are they short square footage for kids also? I mean, that's.
All of the things. So there are many players. So all of these things that I mentioned to you today are like moving parts of this robot that we have. There is definitely a shortage of space. Being able to purchase land too in a lot of our Montana counties is almost impossible just because of the cost. Buildings themselves that are already in existence are hard to access for childcare due to licensing regulations as far as like having green space and those types of things. So they're looking at that. But we're also short workforce. So that's where the pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship expansions come about, is that we really want people to be ready to just jump into this work and be prepared to be in classrooms and be able to be some of those lead roles.
My mind was going there too.
So yes.
16 to 18-year-old in high school, company sponsored program that could bring them in from the high school, blending the 8-hour workday, and then transitioning them, building those potentials. So they have exit points to continue on.
Yep.
That's a really
Because Western has an early childhood.
development.
UM Western has, yep, and so does MSU. we have talked to all of them. We are in conversations with higher ed, trying to figure out how to partner with them a little bit more. Great Falls right now is piloting a pre-apprenticeship program, and it's going pretty well over there. But again, there's funding and there's ways to get people into those situations, but that is something we want to expand. And yes, it would work.
Thanks, Tori. So I'm on the higher ed side, so I'd love to get your information so we can chat sometime.
Absolutely.
We've definitely been talking, and Dean, I'm so glad you brought that up. We've been talking a lot about ways that we can use existing facilities. I know that, you know, a lot of rural schools in Montana have space, and I know that there are a lot of
But schools are great.
licensing requirements that we'd have to identify in Kansas. So I have a partner that I'm working with on the K-12 side who we stole from Kansas, luckily, because she's fantastic. But they had a lot of success with operating quality childcare centers on rural school campuses or within their buildings. And they are using the students, the 16 to 18-year-olds. They're also utilizing dual enrollment opportunities. So those students are getting stackable credentials upon graduation. Some of them could graduate with an associate's degree by the time they're 18. They can also have an associate's degree in early childhood education. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities for us to explore some of those models. We're really in the beginning stages of those conversations. I have 2 principals that are willing to pilot. And so I'm hoping that by the fall, maybe we'll make some progress. And if they're successful, we can start expanding that around. And so I think there's some really exciting conversations happening. And it is a huge win for teacher recruitment and retention. We have teachers in these rural areas, not just rural areas,
Absolutely.
but everywhere, who are not teaching because the cost of childcare doesn't make sense for them to be back in the classroom.
Yep.
Well, if they have on-site childcare that's affordable or subsidized, then it gets those teachers back.
We just did a similar project in Boulder. They actually moved a building from Helena to Boulder to provide the childcare within. But it was because of the school district. They were like, we have no childcare. Like,
Yeah.
we can't teach. We had a teacher that was basically jumping their children around to 3 different people in one day just to make it work. So we helped navigate some of that in Boulder. And yeah,
We had this conversation 4 years ago. Right?
Mhm.
And that there was a program being developed to accept 200 kids type of thing. And then, you know, 4 years ago, I didn't think that much of it. I have a 4-year-old now. I have an 11-month.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate, we decided it wasn't for a full-time job
Absolutely.
with the state versus childcare.
and I've been there. I have 3 young children, 2 of which just went off to kindergarten. They're twins. I had 3 children in childcare and was paying over $2,400 a month, but continued to work, which was pretty much taking home that at that point.
So you mentioned the employer sponsor. One of the challenges that an employer that's 10 to 50 employees doesn't have enough volume.
Exactly.
There. Are there some examples where you partnered together?
Yeah, so that's where those lower tiers come into play. There's lots of different ways that employers can support each other and support childcare as well. We have a lot of, I'll just use the manufacturers around here. We had them all come together and they're like, yeah, we need odd hours. We also don't have enough employees to have an on-site ourselves. So that's where kind of that cooperative like slot care comes in. So like, I'm going to use an example. We have some employer supported childcares that are currently operating in our area. One is Zoot Enterprises. So Zoot Enterprises has it on their campus. However, businesses that are surrounding them access that slot care. So that would be, again, another way to do kind of a cooperative where you have multiple businesses going in together. That's kind of, I think, the angle that we're going to take with the Innovations Grant too, is bringing businesses together and having more of that collaborative approach. Because a lot of them don't have the need for a full-on childcare. But then there's also that partnership with the community too.
Yeah, I think, you know, focusing not only on the lower income side of stuff,
Yep.
but also, how many people have kids? How many of you guys planned 2 years ahead of time that you were having a kid?
Yep, exactly.
I mean, the wait list for availability is really hurting, and then for businesses to get slots, availability, help that.
Yeah, and we have a multi-dimensional kind of employer supported model across the state. Zoot is just one with the SWAT care. There's also XY Planning downtown who does not only their employees, but opens to the community. As well as Printing for Less has just but you know how big their workforce is, but they have just their employees accessing that one. So there's lots of different models. And we have lots of different resources based upon what model fits a business's needs.
That's a great presentation. Thank you. And I think it really highlights the childcare cuts across so many aspects of what talked about today as well. We're going to talk about not just keeping people out of the workforce, but mentioned kindergarten. My wife's a kindergarten teacher, and the amount of kids that enroll in kindergarten at age 4 that are ill prepared to be there, it's an economic incentive. Highlight that, which that contributes to the lack of academic performance and higher drop-off rates longer
Absolutely.
term. So it all kind of hand in glove.
Incarceration later.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
I'd like to introduce Bill Leininger. Bill's with the Montana Associated Realtors and talk about another significant issue facing Montana.
And Tori's information is in the presentation on this page in the presentation. It's posted there.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me here today. Listen, told me I need to project, and as a real estate agent, I don't have any problem projecting. So, Bill Leininger, I was raised in the Flathead Valley. My maternal grandparents homesteaded in the Big Fork area after coming from Fort Peck, Montana during the Depression and Bozeman. And they moved to the Big Fork area in the 1930s. I opened my real estate office in 1995. I remain the broker owner today and operate the office with my wife. I'm very active with the state, local, and national boards of National Board of Realtors. And I bring this up because I'm not a politician. I'm not a land planner. I'm not a consultant. I'm a person who for 30 years has made my living, buying, selling, brokering real estate. When I was given the opportunity to come visit, I spent about 4 days looking at some fantastic housing reports that the Gallatin Association here in Bozeman puts together, Missoula Association of Realtors puts together incredible booklet of statistical data. Talked to Great Falls, their board, Billings up at the Flathead. And it was, honestly, I was swimming with information. And I thought, well, I'll just come and we'll just talk a little bit about what's going on. And then I really look forward to your questions and we'll see if I can get you some answers. And quite honestly, where we're at right now with the real estate market in Montana, there's no quick solutions. There's no fast and easy, but so here we go. It's been about 14 years since the real estate downturn of 2008. Even after the downturn and the collapse of the real estate market, it was estimated at that time, the U.S. housing market was approximately 1 to 2 million homes short of needed housings for the market for proper density units. With depressed pricing, small and large scale developments and foreclosure, and an oversupply of houses and building lots, it was hard to start the needed construction and the planning that was to be projected for the future. Fast forward to today, the estimates now are nationwide an approximate 4 million homes are needed to meet the supply-demand ratio. These stats mirror what is happening in Montana and the current need for additional housing. Unfortunately, we in Montana across the country have hit the perfect, or let's call it the unperfect storm. I do not know a community as large and diverse as Montana is. I do not know a community in Montana that is not hit by the lack of housing, or at least affected by the construction boom and the supply chains that we've all are witnessing and ourselves experiencing. We often see in the news Bozeman, Missoula, the Flathead Valley, but our rural communities are seeing the same growing pains. And a need for additional housing, may it be single family, condo, mobile homes, or apartments, has hit an apex with the COVID lockdown and the reopening of our country. Among many factors, the recent buying craze has been fueled by low interest rates. Now with the exponential growth in sales, when construction of homes needs to be at the highest level, supply chain problems have driven up construction costs and have prolonged completion dates. It is joked that armed guards are needed to be in place on delivery lumber yard trucks. I have seen where a developer has multiple homes close to completion, but the windows may not be delivered for a few more months. The supply chain issue appears to remain a problem for a coming year. The low interest rates did help kick off open the current real estate boom. 3% interest is almost too good to be true. The person who bought their first home in the 1980s, my first home interest rate was at 11.75%. Anybody else double digit? This high interest rate is hard to fathom after what we have seen over the past decade, not to say the past year, but the high interest rate was in line with the affordability index. The housing affordable index is if a geographic area has an HIA score of 100, that means at a given time, a family earning the geography's median income, that is a standard mortgage on a median price for that area, that home would spend 25% of their income on housing. In other words, the high interest rate back then was in line with the pricing that was being suppressed of that home. As the interest rates came down in the 90s, pricing went up. With that index, I have seen reports here in the Bozeman area. If you took the median wage, let's take 3 of those wages to afford an average price of a home in both Greater Bozeman. And it's not much different if you go in the flag. Think of buying a home as not purchasing it for a sales price, but rather a monthly payment. Most of us can't buy a home with cash. We have to obtain a loan and make our monthly payment. Typically, the payment is made up of principal, interest, and taxes, insurance, but for this example, we'll only calculate the principal and interest. If a home costs $400,000, the loan is at 3%, which was up to a couple months ago, is where we were at. And for a 30-year period, the monthly payment is about $1,686 a month. In much of Montana, we have seen somewhere in the area this last year, 20% increase in home value. I have seen in Missoula, they saw their median price go up 28.6% this past year, and it's still increasing. The $400,000 home is now $500,000 with that 20% increase. This equates to a monthly principal and interest payment of $2,108. But we have not only seen the increase in home prices, but we are now witnessing interest rates on a 30-year mortgage hovering around 5%. If you calculate that $500,000 home at a 5% interest rate, you're looking at $2,600 a month. That is approximately $1,000 a month higher over a year ago for that monthly payment. If you calculate that in, that's an increase of about 37%. Needless to say, housing affordability index is way out of balance. Additional challenges that we're seeing, there are many more to the housing in Montana, but here are a few. Montana needs more homes, condos, and apartments. This takes more developments, creating more home sites and dwelling units. For good reason, the subdivision process and other regulatory oversight has many steps. But these steps take time, which currently adds to the frustration of lack of housing. Second, Montana needs more workers to build a house of homes. But as we all have seen with restaurants and other businesses, and as they were just reporting on with daycare, we don't have enough workers. And with that, the construction trades are in tough competition for a tight labor force. Luckily, at least for the contractors, I'm hearing very often guys coming out of high school with no skills starting off at $25 an hour. just to try to get those workers in. And then how do you go to a guy at a restaurant who's trying to hire a busser at 15? So we definitely have a working shortage. Homelessness, many of our homeless are people who have jobs, but because of circumstances, many times out of their control, have them losing a home or rental without means of obtaining housing and or no availability of housing. I have clients that, you try to help them understand what's going on and this tight, housing supply. And I've seen where people have sold their homes thinking they were going to be able to roll into a new one. And now they're in a trailer because they can't find a replacement house. And again, that's not any one community, it's many communities. The increasing interest rates and the threat of a recession is real. The Federal Reserve is hinting at these 2 more interest rate hikes to slow down inflation. And Fannie Mae has forecasted a good chance of a recession in the later part of 2023. This could bring even more unaffordability and instability to housing. Should I just leave now?
Yeah, who invited you?
Trust me, coming over here, I took 4.5 hours to think about this.
Yeah.
Don't worry, it's recorded for posterity.
Unfortunately, the fact is there's no immediate solutions that will have fast and great impact to the housing needs of Montana. Even though there were forecasts for the need of more housing, I do not know anyone that saw what happened on the horizon 2 years ago. What is happening are divergent people and organizations coming together, forming coalitions to tackle tough topics that may not bring immediate relief, but will forge long-term planning and solutions. In Helena and in our local communities, we are seeing a commitment by elected officials from both parties to address and tackle these issues. And I know I saw that Ed Buttrey is on your board, and he is much more versed what's happening in Helena. But a few ideas here. Take many pieces to the pie to make this up, but here are just a few ideas. In Kalispell and other communities, ADUs or auxiliary dwelling units are in discussion. This would change zoning rules, letting an ADU be built where a single family home already exists. Some might refer this to a mother-in-law apartment. An ADU could help bring more residential units within the community and the city services. Not all areas should have ADUs. Parking, access, other factors need to be considered. It's not a catch-all, but it's one piece of the pie. Businesses building homes for their employees. I'm aware of Kalispell, a business in Kalispell that is expanding and employing many more people. There was this old dilapidated lot where there's always, kind of shady trailers on it, broken down. We were kind of worried. That business has cleaned that all off, and they're building their own apartment complex. They're going to control their future of what's going to go on. It's a bigger business, one of the bigger employers in the Flathead. But I've also been talking to the Logan Health, which is Kalispell Regional, to some people on the board, and they're looking, they're trying to find these same solutions. Flathead County, talking to one of the county commissioners, has 82 job openings, and they were saying, when people fly in, they interview, and then they fly out because they can't buy a house or they can't find an apartment. And who here has maybe a college-age student, or you want to have a part-time job? A gentleman who I serve on a nonprofit up in the Flathead, he's the head park ranger for Glacier Park. They need summer employees, and they have housing. And so if you know somebody that would like to go up and greet people in Glacier National Park, by the way, I can't you have to get a reservation now to get in. So maybe, I don't know if there's like a parent, grandparent, child item, but people are looking at, employers are looking at some creative ways to try to help their own folks. Community land trusts. This is nothing new, but the Montana Housing Community Land Trust Program provides purchase money loans secured by a leasehold estate on property owned by a community land trust. Community land trusts were created to preserve long-term affordable homes by acquiring land and building homes in their communities selling the homes to qualified borrowers, but leasing the land using a long-term ground lease at affordable monthly rate. By removing the cost of land associated with a home purchase, borrowers can purchase homes they can afford in high-cost areas. Eligible community land trust must be a nonprofit organization or a public entity, such as a state or local government, counties. I've seen much success. I've participated with people on these. Problem, quite honestly, is finding that available land. But it is a great way. Going back to daycare, how naive we all were at one time. I just thought you had a kid and went a daycare provider. My wife was stressed out. Now, from 35 years ago, it was, not as expensive as now, but it was just as stressful. But one of the first families I helped out with real estate was a family and a single mom, 2 kids, and a community land trust was able to get her out of an apartment and into her own home. The kids had to get a puppy. It's just one of those winning situations for the community. It also took a piece of land in Cattlesville that was sitting, in weeds and gatherment of public money, giving that it's a win-win situation. Regulatory review. Time to take a subdivision from idea to final plan is very time-consuming and expensive. Proposals to shorten the review time for a subdivision have been brought up over and over at the legislative sessions, and more will come up this year. It's hard to imagine there is nothing but a profit for a developer. But many people thought that in 2005 and 6, and many developments went broke when the downturn hit in 2008. Being able to shorten the time to take development through the process would help reduce the risk, and it will also bring more people and dollars to the table. Another example, I'm not sure there's any farm ranch people here, but anybody who has had to do the full water well permitting process, at a minimum, it takes 18 months. And it usually takes over 2 years. And so if you're a developer wanting to put in a subdivision off of a city system, you're going to have to go through this process while you are trying to do the development. And I totally understand that we need to have good regulatory review. Some of this needs to be condensed down so a person who's putting up millions of dollars and has the chance, if you hit that market improperly, you could lose it. We got to help bring a marriage together. The term workforce housing and attainable housing are used to cover what most people in our communities are working to purchase. The price point will vary from community to community due to the average wage in that community, but think of the people that, for this workforce housing, is the school teachers, is the police officers, is the people that are working at our stores, is the people that are secretaries at the law offices. And these people now with Montana graying, our age in Montana is increasing. A lot of these seniors are coming back and they're looking for the same housing type that the millennials and the first-time workforce housing are looking for. Not everybody's looking for a big house. We need to have more infill, we need higher density, and and it also is helped by to the tax burden because we're not pulling our cities out. We're infilling to what is already there. I'm going to wrap this up a little bit, real briefly. Serving on the board of directors for the national we're working on legislation there that should trickle down into the states, and I'll be very brief on this. They are looking at research continues to recognize the benefits of home ownership for our communities and for our household financial growth. Most middle income, minority, and millennial households are able to realize the direct tax benefits of owning a home. These groups are not able to recognize. These groups are already the slowest to recover from the struggle of the Great Recession and continue to face the greatest headwinds to increased home ownership. The NER supports the enactment of meaningful tax credits for down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for the ongoing of home ownership for those who do not benefit from mortgage interest and real property tax deduction. We're looking at housing finance reform and continuing the availability of the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. What Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, if you remember, after the Great Recession, there was an attack on them. But by doing that, the affordability of these loans, if we don't have that 30-year mortgage, we would see a total change in structure of how we go through it. And we would see again, cost of the interest rates going up. And without the amortization over the 30 years, that would also be a great detriment to our housing in this country. We want to keep on having access to credit for all Americans, and also looking at, we know that the research indicates that the student loan debt negatively impacts the ability of potential home buyers to save for down payment, is also having an impact on potential home buyers' ability to qualify for a home due to the high debt to income levels. These factors have limited their access to affordable mortgage options needed to purchase a home. NAR strongly supports policy proposals to allow student loan borrowers to refinance into lower interest rates, provide tax relief to student debt holders and employers who have choose to assist their employees' student loan debt burdens, and provide tax relief to those borrowers with forgiveness of student loan debt. I'm not going to go into the federal proposed legislation that we're working on. I'd rather just open this up to some Q&A. As I said, any one of these topics could go for a full day. The housing crisis, I just really appreciate being able here. Love to see, that people are bringing these issues together. And, through this, we're going to have a better collaborative ability to find some solutions. Love some questions.
Yeah, I would just say, it was really neat to see that Missoula took an address on their emergency workers availability of housing. We have emergency response times that our servicemen for Northwest Energy have to respond to our service center and our customers. That's a regulated response time. Our ambulances, our firemen, all are held to those type of things. And then we need to see that recently, I think Missoula County addressed how far away from these places employees live. Didn't think that was much of an issue. We traditionally never hired journeyman linemen. We pay them $120,000+ a year. They kind of within the 15-minute time. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. We bring in great candidates, they tour, they go with our realtors, and they can't afford it. On that, I'm also excited to see there was a company out of Fort Montana, Silverbow, book company. It's a prefab home. I don't know how long, but I know they're trying to do some outreach organizations looking at company providing housing opportunities. They put up their first one in Bozeman here recently, and it's not a blow over building. It's a garage. Yeah, pretty neat setup. So it's kind of crazy where we turned in the past couple of years. So it's true.
Bill, just one question with interest rates touching 5%, it came off slightly less materially elevated from the percent level. Have you seen a price response to that yet?
No, and it is just, my daughter, her husband had to move, they sold in Bozeman, thank goodness, they bought 6 years ago, but his job took them to Boulder, Colorado. So they were really lucky to have the equity they built. But when they were down there, they were competing so much with cash buyers. We're seeing the same situation up here. I listed a house in Kalispell at $360,000. We had 42 showings in a day and a half. We had 10 cash offers, all at least 10 to 50% over asking. And the gentleman was a vet, and he said some of them were vet loans, VA loans, but it was an older house, and there were some real problems that we're going to run into with a VA oversight. And he said, "I would love to sell this to a vet. I just want to be done." And so we're having a problem with cash buyers, and we're also seeing where you'll have people come in and maybe put down $1 million cash. Now, what's gonna be interesting, before they would then go and get a refinance at 3%. Will they be doing that at 5%, 6%? We'll see, but so the answer is no. We haven't seen any downward pressure yet.
Other questions?
No, just be interested to see some of this legislation. Small counties, Beaver in particular, if we put gates up and keep license plates 6 and 7 out of Beaver County, we could almost handle ourselves. I mean, you guys, I mean, it's pushing Bozeman and the Flathead. I mean, they're growing. I mean, they're pushing people out. Yeah, they're coming to Beaver Head.
So I'm on the board for USS Montana, which is the nuclear sub that's gonna be commissioned, and they have a customized plate for the USS Montana, the nice submarine, and take my 7 off of there. Yeah, just reputation again. I close all my gates.
Okay, well, go, but it is, I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, it's intriguing, all the problems, the property, proper residential property taxes including that's coming up, but it's a scary proposition. I don't know exactly what the answer is.
Well, and I look at some of our smaller communities. So, at least in Bozeman, Whitefish, Kalispell, we're having these growing pains where we're saying, you pretty much over the last 50 years, we got a spike. Look at the growth patterns here. You look at the Havers and these other communities that, how do you sit there and say our sewer system's 85 years old and let's replace it? Where at least, Kalispell, we did theirs, where they could say, well, we got some growth coming in, and we can throw some on the back of developers, we throw some on the back of the current citizens, and we can put in the 25 million or whatever it's gonna be. But these smaller communities, I know they had the COVID relief dollars, Big Fork applied, and there was some things going on that I was involved with in the application. But our person who runs our sewer water system said we didn't stand a chance because we were there to enhance where most of so many communities are there going, we got sewage lines that are broken and we got to dig them up. So.
Very interesting topic. To Mr. McGinley's point, I'm glad that it's been interesting to meet so many people that have moved from the Flathead to the eastern part of the state, not just because the relative affordability itself, a much higher price, but lower price, but also just the quiet. Just inward migration.
One of the things that I'm sure you've heard about was these homes being bought during the lockdown, sight unseen. And it's not as all, but it's cracked up to be. But I did hear one story from a friend of mine. That's one thing I'm just great being the state association. We have friends, brokers across the state. This one gentleman services the cut bank area. Somebody bought offline, not through a real estate agent, a home cut bank. And they just thought, what was the difference between Cut Bank and Columbia Falls? And I think Cut Bank's a great place, but it's a little colder. Wind blows a little bit harder than I think the person was expecting.
Good for it.
So, thank you for allowing me to come in here. If you have any questions, let me know. And again, thank you for you guys for the state of Montana.
Thank you. So, thank you very much, Bill. We appreciate you coming today.
We get this all figured out.
Couple of housekeeping items, if you don't mind, Paul. We'll go ahead and close the recording portion and